Every Friday on Seattle Now, we break down the week's news. This week, Seattle knows how to party, but boy, we left behind a lot of trash at the Seahawks Super Bowl parade.
If I do produce trash, I'm going to carry it with me.
You're
Absolutely.
that gal.
Yeah, no question. Like, for as long as I need to. I'm a trash gal. Did you see me?
Hear that and more on Seattle Now, wherever you get your podcasts.
How do we decide who gets financial support from the government?
Usually it comes down to something called the federal poverty line.
You might think that a lot of data and research goes into establishing that number.
But in reality, it's much squishier. So squishy, in fact, that it involves Jello.
Today on this special episode of Booming, brought to us by our friends at Control F, the surprising history of the federal poverty line. That's coming up.
So, Monica, you and I have been reporting a lot on the affordability crisis. You know, for me, that means looking at the cost of housing.
Yeah, I mean, housing. We've done a couple episodes on the childcare crisis. We just had one on the cost of groceries and how that's driving more high-income or middle-income families to get their groceries from places like dollar stores.
Right, but we haven't really gotten into how we define those terms, like how we decide if someone is middle class or living in poverty. And that's where the Control F team comes in.
Yeah, and Control F is a new podcast from our friends here at KUOW that's all about the data behind the news.
So today we're sharing a special episode of Control F that digs into the federal poverty line, where it comes from and how it shapes so many parts of our lives.
So let's turn it over to the hosts of Control F, Claire McGrane and Tio Popescu.
Today, as you know, we are talking about the federal poverty line, which is supposed to represent the minimum income you need in order to meet your basic needs. That's the goal. And it is used by the government in order to essentially determine your eligibility for all sorts of programs, right? So everything from like food stamps, also known as SNAP, to school breakfast and lunch programs, to child health insurance program like the CHIP, and even parts of like Medicare, Medicaid, and weatherizing your home, job training, legal aid. There's so many random weird things that the poverty line decides if you are eligible for, okay?
As a journalist, it comes up all the time. Like anytime you're talking about a policy, it's mentioned somewhere.
First, I feel like I must say it is not actually a line. Number one thing, it is not one number. It is actually a series of numbers, a spreadsheet, if you will.
A matrix of numbers.
A matrix of numbers, yes. A different number depending on how many people are in your household, okay? So, for example, if you're in a family of 4 making $33,000 a year, you are at the federal poverty line. That means, yes.
That's not a lot of money.
It is not a lot of money. Ooh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to it. What that means is you are at 100% of the federal poverty line.
Okay.
That is the exact amount that the federal government says you need in order to meet your basic needs in income. Okay?
Okay.
You're like, I don't believe it. I don't trust it.
We live in a very expensive area, so I know that I probably have a skewed sense of how much it costs to live, but still, even thinking about areas of the country that are more affordable, $33,000 for
family
a
of 4.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you were in a family of 4 that made half that amount, you would be at 50% of the federal poverty line.
I'm following.
Yep. That would be considered deep poverty. If you made double the federal poverty line, 200%, catching on.
Yep.
Which for me makes me feel like the federal poverty line is more like a marker of your relationship to poverty. How close are you to this number? I almost think of it like a heat map. Like, how close do you get to it? And how close you are actually can make a difference, because some of these programs, like the amount of money you get, also depends on like how close to that line are you, right? So it matters. It's important. But you did already kind of hit on something, which is like how did we get to $33,000 for a family of 4? We are going to showcase this in action, in demonstration. Now, I have asked you to refrain from having any reaction to something that has been sitting in front of you for the last, however long we've been recording here. Now, I am asking you to go ahead and roll your table in front of you, and please describe for our listeners the 3 plates in front of you.
Well, we appear to have a cold quesadilla.
You don't know it's cold.
It looks cold.
That's an assumption you are making.
The cheese is not melty. A sandwich with one very large piece of kind of sad-looking lettuce, and I hope other things. Some apple slices, and then a bowl of, it looks like there's green Jello with apples in it on the bottom. The top is some kind of green foamy concoction that I would expect to be at a Halloween party. So that one I'm very curious about, worried, but curious about.
I like that. A good amount of apprehension.
And then, of course, we have a KUOW water bottle.
We do. There is not water in it. Would you like to unscrew it and take a look inside?
Okay. Ooh! Oh, no.
Oh, no. Listeners, we've had a bit of an explosion.
It's tomato soup, I think.
Is.
And it's also cold, so...
Okay,
there we
look. It was a drive to get here, all right? Imagine it was warm. This would have been made at home, all right?
Sure.
Okay, so what you have in front of you, Claire, are 3 different lunches. One is a Jello lunch potato salad.
I'm sorry, there's potato in that?
Yes, a very well-seasoned Jello potato salad. You're welcome. I put a lot of work and effort.
Where did you get the recipe for a Jello potato salad?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
The next plate in front of you it is not just a piece of lettuce with toast. There is peanut butter.
Why did you put lettuce on the peanut butter?
We're getting to it. It is a lettuce and peanut butter sandwich with apple slices and tomato soup. That is one whole lunch.
I see this.
And then we have a kind of rice and bean and cheese quesadilla. Mm-hmm. Okay.
The most appealing thing so far, I have to say.
These 3 plates in front of you are 3 different lunches that are all included in different iterations of the Department of Agriculture's Thrifty Food Plan, which is the cheapest food plan that the United States puts out for the American public. If your income is 3 times the cost of this thrifty food plan, you are at the federal poverty line. That is how we calculate poverty in America.
Okay. A, if I'm spending a third of my income on food, I'm already worried about my budget.
Mm-hmm.
B, somebody needs to improve these recipes because, I can't imagine how insulting it would be if I was like, oh, I'm looking for budget recipes and I'm told, yeah, peanut butter and lettuce sandwich is the best we've got for you. That really seems like we are failing people who are the target audience of this service.
So the first 2 are from the original version.
And was that written in 1950?
You're getting close.
Okay.
The quesadilla is from the most recent update from 2021. They don't focus on sample recipes the same way anymore. It's more like nutritional guidelines that I use to come up with the quesadilla. So there's the prescribed amount of cheese, beans, rice, and your dark and light vegetables in there. But I should note that the plan has only been updated 4 times. We're going back in time. You were close, but it is 1964. Lyndon B. Johnson is president, and he has declared a war on poverty. It's a valiant effort, important thing. In order to win a war on poverty, you need to have a definition of poverty, which the United States does not have at this point in time. So you were kind of already hinting at it, but I'm going to go ahead and pose it to you now. What would you put as a definition of poverty?
Something you said is not being able to meet your basic needs, right? Obviously, food is one of those basic needs, but I think housing is even more important and even more expensive for a lot of people. You hear the rule that housing shouldn't be more than a third of your income. There's also stuff can you afford to get around? Because for a lot of Americans, that involves owning a car. Can you afford to have internet connection? I think that's a really big one that I wonder about, because that's such a central part of people's lives, right? Kids have to use the internet for homework. People are using the internet to understand what's going on in their communities. I don't know that I have a great unified definition, but it would be, people who are struggling to have the same standard of living as other people in their community.
That is actually a very solid definition.
I appreciate that.
It's certainly better than what we're currently using. But back in the 60s, when we started this war on poverty, we were kind of just like, we need to come up with something. Mm-hmm. In walks Molly Orshansky.
Great name.
Great name. Solid name. Solid person. She really strikes me as pragmatic. I've gotten to know a lot about Molly over the last couple of weeks. She was an economist that worked for the federal government. She also, by her own admission, grew up poor. She was one of 6 daughters from a Ukrainian Jewish immigrant family in New York City. And she really took this war on poverty seriously as a bureaucrat during this era. I'm going to send you a quote from Molly. This is from a profile of her in The New Yorker.
Poor people are everywhere, yet they are invisible, she told a reporter for the Dallas Morning News in 1999. I wanted them to be seen clearly by those who make decisions about their lives.
Molly did feel like she had some sense of that experience, and her focus area had been in food. Okay, she had been at the Department of Agriculture before. So, Molly hears about the war on poverty. She's a doer. She sees that Americans at the time are spending a third of their budget on food. Mm-hmm. She looks at the 2 cheapest meal plans that the Department of Agriculture puts out that year. And she comes up with her own poverty thresholds based on those plans. And then she goes, well, if that's a third of Americans' budgets right now, let's multiply that by 3. Let's do a little extra math to see what that would be for different sized families. And now we have a working definition of poverty until we come up with something else. Never intended for that to be more than this helpful tool. And yet it sticks. And by the 70s, it is the official definition of poverty in the United States.
And then we just 60 years later never improved on it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, it is true that at the time, food was a big part of it, right? Mm-hmm. And again, her work had been in this space. So she really knew food. She really spent a lot of time. I don't want to belittle the amount of energy and effort and math that went into doing that. But to your point, poverty is more than just food. But yeah, pretty much we just kind of went, good enough. And let me be clear. Molly herself does not think that this was the end all be all of poverty. Yeah. Molly has said that by only adjusting this for inflation, which, by the way, is the current standard, we just adjust it for inflation. She says it, quote, tends to freeze the poverty line despite changes in buying habits and changes in acceptable living standards. Yeah.
I completely agree with Molly, right? And the relative amount that things cost in our society has changed astronomically over the last 60 years. The relative amount that people spend today on things like healthcare and housing is way higher than in the 60s. And the amount that they have to spend on things like, technological goods and food in particular is proportionally lower. So it seems like we have a problem here.
Yes, indeed. Also, I'll just point out, the original version of this also expected that you had someone at home to cook all these meals from scratch. The weird Jello needs 3 hours to set. Some of this stuff, people live differently. Mm-hmm. Women are more in the workforce. And none of this factors in some of our different family structures, like students in dorms or seniors in nursing homes. Not every household is made up of a nuclear-ish family.
Totally.
Clearly, everyone agrees this is not the end-all be-all of the definition of poverty, right?
Yeah.
There must certainly be a better way to do this. And we'll get to that. BRB.
On the latest Sound Politics, there's been a lot of drama around one bill being considered in Olympia. It creates a path for elected county sheriffs to be removed from office. Sheriffs are mostly against it, but the bill raises important questions. Should sheriffs only answer to the voters who elected them? Does the state removing them subvert democracy? We'll talk about it on Sound Politics wherever you get your podcasts.
There must be a better way. Yes, there are way too many services, too many benefits, too many people that rely on us measuring poverty accurately. So pretty much from the beginning, people started coming up with alternative options, okay? Including someone who was working on their PhD right there with Molly, named Timothy Smeating.
Another great name, Smeating.
Smeating, yes. Timothy Smeating was doing his PhD at the time that Molly was kind of running with her poverty guidelines. And Timothy Smeating essentially said, okay, there are more pieces to this puzzle. We should really be factoring in a lot of the stuff that you talked about. The internet was not really a part of that equation at the time, but childcare, everything else. And he ended up advocating for a different way of measuring poverty that the Obama administration took over and used to create the supplemental poverty measure. Ooh, look at these names. Yeah, which is basically what it sounds like. It's in addition to the official poverty measure we have, this thing is an actual real disposable income measure.
Okay.
So unlike the kind of unrealistic measure that we officially use, that's all about food, right? Your income and food. The supplemental poverty measure, yes, it looks at your income and how much food you can purchase with it, but it also does things like factor in what are you eligible for, like SNAP and housing assistance. And then it also subtracts things like how much you're paying in taxes and childcare and housing and transportation. Now, to be clear, it is not used to determine people's eligibility for benefits since it factors in your benefits and things like that. But it does help the government better understand the effectiveness of anti-poverty programs. Basically, it's a closer to real life estimate of the actual amount of money it costs to live and also what assistance you might be getting that can offset that. So it's trying to capture the real poverty rate in the United States. And very crucially, it is geographically based.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm so glad that we are getting to this point in the conversation because we live in Seattle. Housing in Seattle is like 3 times more expensive than housing in some other, even like medium-sized cities in the U.S. So I've always wondered how the poverty line works in different geographic regions.
Well, the poverty line does not. There's no cost adjustment to the poverty line except for Hawaii and Alaska. But the supplemental poverty measure does factor in regional differences in cost of living.
Cool.
So the supplemental poverty measure is a much closer to real estimate of poverty in the United States. And with that in mind, I'm going to send you a graph of the poverty rate in the United States from the beginning of the war on poverty to now using Timothy Smeating's supplemental poverty measure.
Hey, okay, that doesn't actually look too bad. This chart is kind of all over the place. The line that measures the poverty rate it looks like a mountain range. There's like big peaks, big valleys, big spikes. But overall, it seems like if I plotted a trend line on here, it would be going down.
Yeah, you're right. So overall, poverty has been on the decline since we started this war. Because remember, we are in a war on poverty.
Still.
However, as you can see, it goes back and forth a bit with recessions and whatnot. But the big spike down is during COVID. That is because we went and had that huge expansion of the child tax credit, which gave a lot of money back to parents. And we expanded SNAP benefits at that time, right? That took child poverty, which is one of the kind of largest groups of poverty that we have right now, from 13% to 5%.
Wow.
And then it went right back up to 12% as soon as those additional funds ran out.
Yeah.
So basically what the leading experts, Smeating and others, have said is that at this point, if America wants to dip back into single digits for poverty overall, it needs to fundamentally rework how it thinks about poverty, how it decides eligibility for things, and what the quality and the quantity of the resources we provide are. We got to do a big swing if we want to actually dip down into single digits.
So just to kind of summarize what you said there, we know how we could really reduce poverty. And it's things like putting more resources towards these programs, but also adjusting who qualifies for the programs. Like, that's the big thing.
Yeah, it's a combination of those two things, at least in our data, shows that it works, right? But there are reasons why we haven't done that.
People don't like to spend money on stuff.
You are correct. The moment that we redefine poverty, we probably have more people in it, and therefore we have to spend more money and resources to address that problem, right?
Yeah.
This is actually so obvious that the older millennials in our audience might be currently screaming into their phones, hey, there's a whole West Wing episode about literally this.
Under the new formula, poverty is up 2%. It was anyone under 17,524 before. Now it's 20,000.
What does that check out to?
4 million new poor people.
4 million?
Yeah, obviously that's the bad news.
Yeah?
The good news is that more people will be eligible for benefits.
And taxpayers are nuts about that.
So I really see the conundrum here, because benefits and regulations and like all of these things, they were written with the assumption that the poverty line was decided in one way. And clearly, as we've been talking about, that's not very realistic to how people live. So it's not really working in that measure. But we can't just change it without that change having huge cascading effects for all of this other stuff that would like throw half our government into chaos, basically. So it kind of seems like we're between a rock and a hard place of like, how do we move forward and try and solve that problem without it blowing the system up?
It's actually even more kind of a thorny, complicated mess than I even gave it credit for. So I'm going to tell you the story of two people very quickly to kind of illustrate this point, because it didn't really stick for me until I mapped it out for myself. So these are two made-up people, but they are based on real data of Americans right now. And the details of their lives are based on stories submitted by NPR listeners who were at risk of losing SNAP back in October and wrote into us.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have two people. One is named Rosa. She's an 11-year-old here in Seattle, Washington. She's the oldest daughter in a family of 4. Her family lives right below the poverty line, that $33,000 a year number. Okay. She knows her family's biggest economic woe, because they talk about it all the time, it's rent. But because she's under that poverty line and all of the things that are connected to it, her and her brother do get free meals at school. They are on SNAP, the whole family is, with an average of $6 a day per person, which is the maximum they could get.
Wow.
And very importantly, after they applied to SNAP, her mom found out that they're eligible for all these other programs that you kind of automatically get ushered into once you're eligible for SNAP. Again, that thread that the poverty line kind of draws you through. So now they have subsidies for their electricity and to help weatherize their house and all of these extra things, job training, all that stuff. Childcare subsidies so that her mom could go to job training. And she definitely wants to get a new job because she's working 3 of them right now, and she barely ever gets to see Rosa or her brother, and they still can't afford basically to live. On the other side of the country, we have Margaret. She's a 68-year-old woman. She's retired. She lives alone in nice little Oxford, Mississippi. She also lives right below the poverty line, but for an individual that's just shy of $16,000 a year. She owns her own house. She's not worried about rent. She doesn't have that problem. Her big concern is that she has a lot of medical debt. She was helping a family member with end-of-life care, and it just wiped out her savings and brought her into medical debt.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so for her, her fixed income comes solely from Social Security, and she really relies on the fact that she lives in a low cost of living area and doesn't have to worry about housing costs, right? She remembers the relief she had the first time her Social Security check came in, because it was the first time that she could pay everything at once. She also gets that $6 a day of SNAP benefits, right? And She also has Medicare, but she knows it doesn't cover everything, right? So that's a concern for her for the future. Rosa and Margaret live in very different places. They are both technically in poverty in the United States, but like the services they need and their concerns are totally different, right? And in the system we have right now, Margaret is kind of benefiting from the fact that the poverty line doesn't take into account the cost of living where you are, right? Every change you make, because of how complicated and interwoven this system is going to change the equation of the winners and losers here. And that was something that, you know, I was reading multiple reports from experts, and they said this is part of the big behemoth problem with changing the way that we define the poverty line and eligibility. It's not just we don't want to pay the money. It's that like you are going to make some hard choices for people.
When we define poverty in this like here is a number, if you're below it, you're in poverty. If you're above it, you're not. Like that really misses the point of how social services are supposed to work and help people, right?
Yeah. I think it's valuable to know that everyone who's been in the weeds of this for so long still says we should change it, right? When I think about that graph I showed you, the fact that we were able to drop childhood poverty so substantially in a year, you can look at that and be pessimistic of like, wow, look how quickly it shot back up. But for me, that also just, again, is the proof point of like, if we're willing to make the big swing change, we will see immediate returns. You could significantly change the course of people's lives and a lot of children's lives, which I think is a big part of the calculation here.
That was Control F, a new podcast from KUOW all about the data behind the news. They've done episodes on what your credit score really says about you and what's behind the high cost of healthcare in the U.S.
You can find Control F on the KUOW app or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's it for Booming this week, and thanks for listening. Hey, I've got a call to action for you. We're going to have light rail connecting the east side and the west side of Lake Washington soon, and I'm wondering if that's going to change your life in some way. And if it is, I'd love for you to let me know how. You can write us at booming@kuow.org, or you can leave me a voicemail at 206-221-7158.
We're also always open to tips and story ideas, so if there's something that you think would make a good Booming episode, reach out to that email address or leave us a voicemail.
That's right. Also, special thanks to those of you who are donating to the show. That's really important. You've probably heard about, funding for public radio, etc. Well, you are an important part of keeping us sustainable. So if you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming.
Booming is produced by Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan, edited by Carol Smith. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols.
And we'll catch you next time.